Hey guys, welcome to the webinar, the Teacher's Discovery and Vocis Digital, the More Than Timed Writings, Practical Writing Strategies and Techniques for the CI Classroom. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to stop by today and check out the webinar. Yeah, I saw the list of all the other webinars and that was a great group. Those are really great webinars, and again, I appreciate you guys taking the time to be here with me today. I am Eric Richards. I teach at Fort Zumwalt North High School in O'Fallon, Missouri, which is a St. Louis suburb. I'm a German teacher and the World Languages Department Chair. I'm also an author and a TPRS Books presenter. I've presented regionally and national with TPRS Books, so maybe I've seen a few of you. I hope so. And actually, and also this year, I was recently honored by the Foreign Language Association of Missouri with the 2019 Distinguished Foreign Language Educator of the Year Award. I was very honored and humbled by such an award. You'll see I brought up an author that I did author a series of books here, the Neue series, that are currently in German. They're working in other languages to get in Spanish and French, and then also here a book about short stories, and then grafted writing, which I worked with Teacher's Discovery with, and really excited, and which is the basis of this presentation. So I only bring that up to tell you why my love of writing. I do love writing. I love books and reading, and this was just kind of came out of that. So let's get going. Today we will make writing in the target language compelling, creative, and engaging. We're going to learn how to use various readings and texts as a scaffold and crutch to help students write better. And we're going to help students graft their own creative, original ideas to text in such a way that personalizes and gives them ownership of the story and makes them want to share their writing. We are also going to learn how to get more repetition of the language structures through writing. Plus, we're going to get the benefits of reading. And we are going to also use techniques to help students grow their writing abilities. And hopefully we'll be able to immediately use the techniques in our classroom. As a classroom teacher still, I understand how busy we are and the time pressures that we face every day. So hopefully we'll be able to take these and incorporate them immediately with very little prep. So as we get going, our goal is to create a pathway for better personalized writing that allows students to grow confidence in their writing and language abilities and excites them to freely engage more fully in class. But before I get started, I know this is a webinar, but I'm gonna ask you a few questions here. So I'm gonna talk about you and just give you guys some things to think about. And as I ask the questions, just think about them. And so our first question is, how many of you find that your students have difficulty and or do not enjoy writing in the target language? I can tell you this was the situation I was in as a classroom teacher, very much, especially in the first few years of my teaching career. I did fail to mention this is my 15th year teaching, so this has been growing over the years. But to be honest, they really did have some difficulty, and I knew that was a problem. Also, how often do your students creatively write in class? In other words, what percentage of your class overall is used for writing exercises and not included doing a timed writing? Are there other exercises that you do and incorporate in class, and how much of time is spent in class with any kind of writing activity or beneficial writing activity? I can also tell you, if I'm being honest here, I was really struggled with this too. We didn't do a lot of writing in class. They really suffered, and what we did was not very beneficial for the students. Also, do you as an educator struggle at times to find beneficial writing activities that are more than a story retell? Again, this is something I struggled with as I got into more of TPRS and CI over the years. I found myself doing just story retells, but I was struggling a little bit to how do I drive my students to write a little bit better in the target language, but the writing exercises are beneficial where they do get the input and they are productive exercises. So I really struggled with this, and over the years tried to develop things to help remedy this problem and help strengthen my students in this area. I'm also going to ask you one last question here. How many of you still have your students physically write things down on paper, not type it out on a computer? I ask this question because I know many of us are going one-to-one in schools where all the kids have a laptop and a lot is assigned online and they do a lot of assignments online. I'm going to come back to that question here in just a second. But I wanted to give you guys a little background about me and how I got to here with the writing exercises. I can tell you, my students eventually got bored when we approached writing in class. Writing assignments were not engaging, they were predictable, and they were mechanical. Um, and the students did not possess the necessary vocabulary. They didn't know how to say things. It was too open, especially in my beginning levels. So when we were predominantly doing a story retell, which is a great exercise, don't get me wrong, it's a great exercise, I still do it, or timed writing, they were predictable, they were engaging. But however, when I asked, especially my beginning levels, to change, like the ending or give a new ending, I realized they didn't possess the vocabulary to make it meaningful and able to express themselves. It proved difficult for many of my students. And as we've probably seen, no matter what the activity is, if it proves too difficult or it's above their level or out of bounds, the students will maybe shut down, they'll stop wanting to share their work and even engage in class. And one of my goals was, as I went through this, I wanted my students participating and sharing more of their own thoughts and ideas, but I realized they needed more support to do this. And I also wanted to get more out of text and more ways to creatively engage my students with a text. And I will tell you before we move on that these exercises that I'm going to share, plus more, I do with all my classes, and I do with all my students from level 1. I teach German 1 through 4, and my students, they're proud of their work. They want to share their creativity, and they're more engaged, and they're writing at better at all levels. So I want to come back to that last question here real quick before we move on. Regarding the last question, do you still have students physically write things down on paper? The science does show that handwriting boosts learning and memory. Physically drawing letters activates a distinct neural pathway that improves reading comprehension and memory of a language. I know technology is great, but I still do have my students do quite a bit paper to pen or pencil to paper, and have them physically write down, just because the brain science does show that there is an advantage to it. Do we always do it? Not necessarily. We are one-to-one at my school, and we do engage online also, but I still do follow the brain science and know the importance of having them physically write down some of the exercises. Some food for thought about writing. And this, I think, is actually important, especially for today and where our students are at. Because we live in a society where we are constantly communicating through written language. Although we may dismiss it as only texting, tweeting, or posting, it is still communicating through writing. And our students do this all the time. To be sure, these are not formal genres of writing, but they are a form of writing. In fact, I just, with my students in high school, sometimes I think they communicate through writing more than they do verbally talk to each other sometimes, as they sit there and text each other even though they're sitting across from each other. So just something to think about writing and in the world where we're at. And I wanted to share a few things about reading, because you're going to see a lot of these writing exercises are going to drive the students back to the text, and I really wanted to drive my students back to the text for the advantages of reading and the power of reading. I think as foreign language educators, we are aware of reading in the target language and the power of it and all the benefits, but I do want to just share a few things with you and to kind of give you a little bit of background. Why do I want to drive my students back to the text and have them keep working with the text and graft the text and use the text for their writing exercises? I'll read a few of these. People acquire a second language have the best chance for success through reading. Stephen Krashen, if you're familiar with Stephen Krashen's research, he's done a lot with that. If not, go out, check out Stephen Krashen, and his research is really quite enlightening. Incidental learning of words during reading may be the easiest and single most powerful means of promoting large-scale vocabulary growth. And we remember things best when they are organized with everything else we know, when they come with stories attached rather than isolated bits of information, according to Frank Smith. And I really thought this was a really interesting fact here as I came across this one, and I wanted to share it with you. Visual receptors in the brain outnumber auditory receptors, 30 to 1.32. In other words, the chances of a word or sentence being retained in our memory bank are 30 times greater if we see it instead of just hear it. And I'm not shorting oral input. It's very important, obviously, very important with comprehensible input, but there's also the input through reading, which I feel is just as important. And learning is rooted in repetition and convexity, meaning that the reading of a single text twice is more profitable than reading two different things once. So again, that's really that idea of how do I drive them back to the text, use the same text, get that repetition, continuously get the reading input. And I just love this quote. I wanted to share it. Vocabulary and coherent sentences can't be downloaded onto paper unless they've first been uploaded to the head by reading. And I'm going to add a little bit of oral input. So we're going to get to some exercises here in just a second, but I just wanted a quick note for you before we move on. Don't be afraid to do an exercise in English or their first language. It really helps facilitate their writing when they understand the concept and structure of the exercise. As a teacher, I want to get to the, oh, this is what we're doing, this is what it's supposed to look like moment quicker. And I find sometimes when I'm giving directions in the target language, there can be a little bit of confusion, or it could just be a little bit slower than I need it to be, but I want to get to that moment. So again, that's something you'll decide as a teacher if you like giving directions in the target language, the benefits of that, or the clarity of their first language. So don't be afraid. And please remember that you're the expert in your classroom. As we all go into our rooms, guys, we know our students, we know their abilities. And I always say, just because I do something, it doesn't mean somebody else has to do it. You're the expert, and just take the overall idea here and implement it as you see fit. Play to your strengths and play to your teaching style. Again, we all have different teaching styles. We're all bringing great things to the classroom, but we definitely want to play to our strengths. So if something's resonating with you, take it, run with it, yeah, make it better and play to your strengths. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and we'll get started with some exercises here. Our first exercise here is what I call condensing content. And again, as we go through these exercises, I want you guys to kind of think in your head how we're driving the students back to the text and the benefits of reading plus the benefits of writing. So the first one, again, is called condensing content. What I do is I have students read a text, and however you work with the text, but when we're done working with the text and reading the text, I have the students in this case, physically write down, in my case, but again, they can type it out. They can write down 5 or whatever number of the most important sentences that retell the story. I always tell my students that they're not allowed to change a sentence or combine. They must be the original sentence from the text. And what this is really going to do is, as a teacher, the 5 sentences, I do want them to retell the story, but at some point the 5 sentences to me are inconsequential. What I want to do is drive my students back, because what's going to happen here is your students say, okay, what are the 5 sentences that retell the story? They're going to go back to the text and they're going to reread it, and they're going to reread it a few times, but it's also based on the fact they have to understand the text in order to be able to do this, because if they don't understand the text, this would be very hard to give you a summary of the text. So again, after you work with the text however you want to, 5, again, arbitrary number, you can tell them whatever number that of the most important sentences that retell the story. And then I have them write them down. But with my students, you can stop there, but I always try to offer an extension. If I were to say, okay, all my students did this, they have their 5 sentences, I have my students compare sentences with a partner and how many were the same. Or maybe I have the students read their sentences to their partner for a little bit more oral work, or just to change it up, give it a bit of a different feel. And this is fun because then they can share how many sentences did you guys share? Did you share 3? Did you guys write down 4 the same? You can have a little bit of fun with that. However, this extension is something that you can keep growing. Now I can say, okay, you and your partner have to decide on 5 sentences and write them down. So maybe the 2 students get together and they come up with 5 sentences. Maybe they reused a few that they already had down that they shared, and they come up with 5 new ones that they agree on that best retell the story. And you can actually keep growing this until you get to the whole class. So you could take those 2 students, have them turn to another 2 students, and those 4 collaborate and work and come up with 5 sentences, and so forth as you grow until you can actually work with the whole class and have the class decide on what are the 5 most important sentences that, or whatever number, that retell the story. So you just kind of keep growing it and have them keep sharing as they go. Also, as you guys do this, everything is always bound by your students' ability. You want to keep it in bounds. And what is their ability level? If your students are able to talk about in the target language why something is more important than the other, have them talk about it. Have your students talk about why they feel a sentence is more important than the other, what emotion or message is it conveying, and why it should be included. You can always have your students talk, just whatever their ability level is. Okay, also, and I will tell you, as a high school teacher, we're always looking for mileage. How do we get a little bit more out of this? And I really find with my students that if I simply change the name of something, it may be the exact same activity, but if I change the name, they totally buy in. It's a brand new exercise to them, even though it's essentially the same thing. And I encompass that in mind reading. I tell my students it's the exact same setup. We read, they're going to write down 5 sentences, but I tell them they're going to work with partners this time, and that the one student is going to be you choose one of them to be the mind reader. And what that student is going to do is go to the text, and they're going to write down the 5 sentences that they think their partner is going to write down. To the students, this feels like a brand new exercise when essentially it's the same idea. They're driving back to the text, going through the text, coming up with their 5 original. And guess what? The 5 that the student writes down that they think their partner is going to write down were probably going to be the 5 that they were going to write down anyway. But it's just a fun, kind of gives the activity a little bit of a different feel to get a little bit more mileage out of this activity. And then they can compare, and you can see who the best mind reader in class is. Did anyone guess all 5, or how many did they share? 3, 4, whatever the number. And then again, it's something to keep in mind that the next time you can reverse roles, and it just kind of keeps the activity fresh. And also I do it where sometimes I have them read my mind. I have my 5 sentences or whatever number ready to go, and I have the students read the text and they write down their 5, and then I project my 5 sentences on the board, and I go around and we see which student read my mind the most, and then I might give them a sticker or just something fun. But it's just, again, it's the same idea. I'm driving my students back to the text. They're getting the benefits of physically writing out the sentences. And you have to think, when their students are writing out these sentences, they're getting good grammatically correct sentences because they are writing down the sentences from the text. So you want to go back to those neural pathways that they're forming good, grammatically good sentences as they write it down. So let's go back to just another quick variation of this idea of driving to the text and trying to pull something out of the text. So if I have the text, I call this treasure hunt. Students write down 5 or whatever number of sentences that contain a specific word, structure, or topic. For example, and again, this is completely arbitrary. It could be targeted, non-targeted. It's however you want to do it. I could say, here's a text. Could you write down 5 sentences from the text that contain the word bicycle? So they go through, and could they find 5? Or could they write down 5 sentences from the text that contain the structure did not see? So again, they'll drive them back. They're looking for the structure. Then they'll be writing down the sentences. Or, for example, could you write down 5 sentences from the text that talk about topics? So you can go to a word, you can go to structure, you can go to topic. But again, the idea is I want to drive my students back to the text to get the benefits of reading, and then I'm having them physically write this out to get the benefits of good language because it's coming directly from the text. All right, and again, I want to say this is you will see your students deeply reading text multiple times. I mean, really, it's quite incredible. The first time I did this, first few times I did it, and they may even yell at you because they want to write more. So I always tell people, when you're deciding on a number to best retell the story or whatever, retell the story or mind reading, that you want to err on the side of less, because what less will do is it's essentially going to make it more difficult for them to retell the story. So I always go err to the 5, where it's going to make it a little bit more difficult, where they're really going to go back. So what it's going to do is cause my students to continuously go back to the text and read it deeply, so they just what are the 5 that best tell this story. And then I said, my students, I put that in quotes, they yell at you. My students are always like, I need one more to make it complete. So that tells me that they're reading, they're comprehending, and they're continuously driving back to the text. So that's a little hint for you. All right, let's move on to the next activity here. What a difference a detail makes. And this is where I take a text and I have them change a detail in it. And I'm going to give you a hint. This works well with shorter text or passages or paragraph. And there's multiple ways that I work with it. I tell them to take a text in usually like a paragraph or whatever, and I tell them rewrite the selected text, only changing a detail or details, but they must remain consistent throughout the rewrite. So I tell them you can change the names of the characters or the places or actions and such. Everything's only bound by their ability. And I'm going to give you guys some examples here shortly, but also let me show you a couple examples. I'm going to come back to the listening, speaking, and more writing, but I wanted to give you an example of what do I mean like this. So if I had this story here, there is a duck. The duck is in St. Louis. The duck is sad. The duck is sad because she wants to dance, but she can't. She can't dance because she doesn't have dance shoes. The duck wants dance shoes so she can dance. She wants to do the duck dance. And the story continues. But if I were to say, let's go ahead and change one detail in that first paragraph to my students, it might look like this. And you can set the parameters however you want. You could say it has to be an animal. You just set the parameters. But it just, what they're going to do, again, is they're going to drive them back to the text. They're going to essentially be rewriting that paragraph with the good structures, and they're going to change the text. But just that little change really going to give them a little bit of ownership of that of the text. So if I changed it from duck to elephant, it'd say there is an elephant. The elephant is in St. Louis. The elephant is sad. The elephant is sad because she wants to dance, but she can't. She can't dance because she doesn't have dance shoes. The elephant wants dance shoes so she can dance, and so forth. But just by changing that detail is going to give them ownership of it. But you can actually change anything in any text. If there's something specific you're working on, that's great. Otherwise, they can change places. They don't have to be in St. Louis anymore. They could change verbs, actions. Maybe she doesn't want to dance. Maybe she wants to do something else. You can change emotions. Maybe the duck isn't sad. What are some other things we could change? Or objects, or names, or places. You could change shoe store names, anything that you wanted to. So it's really kind of up to you what you're looking for to change and changing different things. So what I do is after I have my students do this, sometimes, again, I'm going to jump around here a little bit. I may just have my students read it to a partner or share it with the class. And you'll find it's really amazing that I found with my students that as soon as they change one little thing in a text, it becomes theirs automatically. And they start getting excited and they want to share because it kind of becomes a little bit of their own. So now they're sharing with their partners, they're listening, and if you really think about it, they are hearing and reading, and they're getting a lot of repetition with that text because essentially they changed one word in there, the rest of it is the same. So it's a good text, and they're hearing it and they're getting lots of repetition. I also have done it once they get comfortable with this exercise where I have a student write and change details in one paragraph, and then he or she passes it to a partner, and the partner changes the details in the next paragraph, and so on. However, the partner has to read the paragraph before and keep the details consistent throughout. So if they change the name in the first one, or like in this one, like if they rewrote the first paragraph, one student changed it to elephant, as the next student went to rewrite this paragraph, they would have to change duck to elephant in all of those and then change another detail. Also, another fun thing you guys can do is if the text is in front of them, again, this is just to offer you a little variation with your students, is I like to do choral responses with my class where maybe I read in German, and after each sentence, the whole class chorally responds and tells me what it means in English. The choral response, it's fun, especially with short text, and gets everybody involved and very safe for the students because if they're not sure, they kind of hide in the crowd there. But what I will do sometimes is I will say, okay, I'm going to read the text aloud, and I'm going to change the details as I'm reading aloud in German, and they chorally respond as a class. So they may be reading on their text, they're going to see on a paper, there is a duck, but I'm going to say, as I read aloud, there is an elephant, so the class would respond, and they'd have to make that change that they heard me and respond that there is an elephant. So again, that would be in German, and they'd respond in English with there is an elephant, and respond with my detailed changes. I hope that makes sense, but it's a lot of fun, especially with shorter ones, just a good way to kind of get the class, everybody involved here quickly. So let me give you, let's go to our next exercise. Our next exercise is called adjectives. This is really fun. This one I get a ton of mileage out of, and the kids I find really like this. And this is the one I never stop being amazed about how by just adding adjective, how you can completely change the feel of a text, and it really personalizes it for the students. So basically what the students do is they take a part of a text or a paragraph and they rewrite it, adding an adjective or two to each sentence. Also, for teaching too, this is a great exercise for adjective endings with your language. If they do have adjective endings, adjective noun agreements, or adjective placement in sentences, because I guess with the Romance languages, the adjective comes behind, which might be a little bit something new for native English speakers, but it's a good way for students to see that. And I'm going to stop saying this after this, because it is important to remember, after they do these exercises, doesn't matter what you do, have them work with a partner, with a group, have them read their versions out loud, share it with the class, let the class hear the different variations and versions, because the students are going to start getting excited, because you'll start seeing that it's personalized, they have ownership, and they want to start sharing. And that was something that I just found I didn't want to cut out of class, because of the student excitement and their work, and they were sharing, and we were getting lots of good stuff, and a lot of good things came out of it as we shared. And so let me go back here and give you a quick example of adjectives. If we had the original paragraph or text here, it is a fall day. There is a house. It sits next to a country road. In the fireplace, a fire glows. Smoke curls rise from the brick chimney. So if I said, okay, let's go ahead and add one adjective to the sentence. If I told my class this, and I said, it has to flow, has to make sense. And if we took the same text and I added one adjective, you'll see these next two examples. How much does it actually change the feel of that text? So if I said it is a cool fall day, there's a cozy house. It sits next to a quiet country road. In the fireplace, a warm fire glows. Soft smoke curls rise from the brick chimney. You can already see how there's a totally different feel from the original. And here's another example. It is a windy fall day. There is a neglected house. It sits next to a dusty country road. In the fireplace, a small fire glows. Smoke curls rise from the black brick chimney. Again, you can see how the adjectives bring the text to life, but how different adjectives can totally change the feel and the mood of the text. So it's quite amazing, especially when they get sharing how just a simple adjective can change the original text. This is fun. This is easy. This is a great one to do. And the students, I find I get a lot of mileage, and they really enjoy doing this one. And as they get better, you can set parameters how you'd like to. You can set more than one adjective, or you can give them a list of adjectives to say, hey, you've got to work these in. If you wanted to target a little bit more, you can leave it open, add more. But yeah, that's a lot of fun. So I hope that makes sense. All right, let's keep moving on. Let's go to rotating desks. Okay. This is a lot of fun. It's kinesthetic. It gets your students up, and it can be a lot of fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the example, and then I will come back to hear what I've written. Okay, so what I do is I embed a story, let's say on a PowerPoint, okay, on a slide. My students are sitting at a desk, and on their desk is a piece of paper. We all start with a blank piece of paper. The desks can be set up in a circle or a half circle, but the students will be rotating, so I try to make it in a setup so they can easily rotate. And what we do is we say we're going to have an interesting story here. And so imagine all of your students are sitting at a desk with a blank piece of paper. And I say, okay, here's our first slide. Es gibt ein, and then I'm going to have them decide, is there a boy or a girl? It could be an animal. It could be anything you want it to be. And so what I do is I say, could you guys go ahead and write this sentence down on your piece of paper on the first line? And I said, you can choose whatever it is. So some students will write, es gibt ein Mädchen, es gibt ein Jungen. So there is a boy, there is a girl. And then I say to my students, I say, okay, everybody leave your paper on the desk. You are rotating, the paper doesn't ever leave the desk. It's the students moving, not the paper. So my students stand up, and I say, go to the next desk. And then I project the next slide. And it says, in this case, in the German, like his name is or her name is. And I say, okay, on the second line, read the first line, and now under the first line, write this slide out and give the person a name. And so they'll write it down, and once everyone's done, I say, okay, leave the paper on the desk, we're gonna rotate, and then they'll continue the rotation. I project the next slide, and this says he or she lives in. And I'll say, okay, start at the top, read through so you kind of get the details, and then I want you to write down the third line, he or she lives in, and they write that down and they fill in where they live. Again, you can set the parameters if you wanted a country, a city, a state, it doesn't matter. And they write that down. Then again, students, leave the paper, rotate one more. And then I tell them, okay, I want you to give me 3 characteristic traits of this person. So they would have to start at the top, and they read through, and then they would, on the 4th line, write this one down, giving them 3 characteristics. Same thing, they rotate, and then I'd say, okay, on the 5th line, write down, you know, he or she likes, what are 2 things that this person likes, and they write it down. And we continue through. Now, with that being said, let's stop and think about what's going on here. The paper's always on the desk, so the students are writing, they're up, they're mobile, good for the kinesthetic learners, keep them moving. But every time they sit down at a new desk, what are they gonna have to do? They're gonna have to go to the top of the story, and they're going to have to catch up with the story so they can continue the story in an appropriate manner that makes sense and that it flows. So let's say you do 20 rotations. They've had to ultimately read that first sentence 20 times by the time you get to the end of this, and they keep reading the story. So I want to get the repetitions of the story. So, and if you look at these, a lot of the details to me are consequential. I'm focused on, are they working on this phrase, in this case in German, es gibt, there is, okay? Again, they're writing it down. It's up there. I've put the structure up there in good German fashion that they want, that I need them to, and they're writing it down. But at the same time, they're more worried just about the detail. We're just throwing in a detail. Again, the name, to me, kind of inconsequential, but that's what gets the students excited because they're giving their own personal touch to this. So again, in the background, they're reading the story as you go on and starting from the top. They're seeing the structures, the good structures, and they're writing down what I need them to write them down for those neural pathways. But this is very exciting for them because they want, they're adding the details and they're making the story as we go. And I will give you a couple hints if you decide to do this. This is a lot of fun. And I'll give you the first hint is do not let them rotate back to their desk until it is all over. So either stop the rotation before they get back to their desk. Let's say you have 22 kids. Don't do 22 rotations. Do 21 or less. Because what's going to happen is the students, as you guys progress and they start doing this, they're going to just want to get back to their desk. They're going to want to see the story that's left for them on their desk. But don't let them rotate through because they'll kind of ruin it. Or if you have a smaller class, just have them skip their desk so they can't read their story until you're done with how many of your slides that you want to do for your story. So that's your first hint, because after we get done with all our rotations, your students are going to go back to their desks, and guess what they're going to do? They're going to read the whole story, and it's really fun to see their faces light up and just to see all the different variations. So once you have all these stories, they'll be excited. You can carry these on through class. They can swap stories with each other. You get a little instant reading time out of your students. I'm drinking a cup of coffee. they're having a great time sharing their stories, reading their stories. But again, they're reading the stories with the good structures and just the different details, and it feels like a different story to them every time. You could have them do read alouds, share with a partner with the class. Some of them, you'll see hands will go up. They'll want to share these because they'll think it's funny. Or you can pick a story or let the class choose. Now tell an oral story, act it out, base an oral story on what is written there, and you have the writing backing. And also, you can collect them, and then you don't have to do it right away. You can just, hey, thanks guys, collect them, and then later on, if you want to do an oral story, you have a pre-made story for class, and you can do it weeks later, months later, and they'll come back to it. They're like, oh, that's my story, and it generates student interest. Also, you can have them go back and add their personalization of the stories. sentences, dialogues, if they're after they go through, they can go back and say, okay, now why don't you guys add a dialogue here? You guys can add a few other sentences, whatever you want, depending on the level of your students. But this is also a really neat activity, because in the end, what you're essentially going to have is an instant class storybook. And you can do this however you want. Sometimes I have my students take their story, take the time to type it out. Maybe we'll take the time to double check to make sure spelling's good on their details. Sometimes I just have them send it to me. I can print each one of them out if technology at home can be an issue, or I have them printed out at home. And you can simply put them in a binder, staple them together, and add them to the classroom library. So let's say you have 20 kids in your class. You just have 20 stories now in a little binder, or stapled together, however, and put them in the library. And then if you guys do SSR or FVR, they'll probably want to check it out and read it so they can see all the stories that are going on, that went on in the class. I do have one recommendation for you, though, that if to spice it up a little bit after I have them type it out, send it to me, that they add a picture or a comic. So if I print it out, I may hand it back and say, all right, add a picture or a comic, because it adds some color, adds some life, and it's always fun to have them illustrate a little bit, and it personalizes a bit more, and then boom, right into the classroom library, and they'll check it out. And you'll find, if you, let's say, have multiple levels of, let's say, German 2 or Spanish 2, French 2, that the other classes during FVR, SSR will probably want to go back, see what the other classes came up with, because essentially the guts of the story are the same for all the hours. They're just putting in the details. That's a lot of fun. It's a really good one to get your students going. Minimal prep time to get the slides going. Try it a few times, and hopefully you'll enjoy some success with it. I'm just gonna pause here for a second. Just a quick check. I hope we're still following along okay. I can't, since I'm sharing the screen, I can't see any comments or questions, so hopefully I'll get those answered at the end. So if you have a question, we do want to make sure that that is taken care of for you. So I hope you're following me, and any questions, just save those in, and we'll make sure those get answered. But other than that, are we ready to move on? All right, let's go on to our next activity. It's called Publishing Problems, and I'll give you some more examples as we go. It's basically, we can't publish a story, it's unfinished. And there's multiple ways you guys can approach this idea. Students have to insert a topic into, let's say I give my students a text, and I find a good topic that they could insert into, kind of bring the text to life, to finish it, so to say. And so I could have a topic of travel, family, character descriptions, traits, anything into the text as they rewrite it. Don't forget the parameters of the assignment, the number of sentences. Maybe you want to have them place it specifically somewhere in a text, or beginning, end, throughout, it doesn't matter. But so you could use something, a topic, say, hey, I want you to insert 3 sentences on the topic of family in there, but I want the text to still flow and make sense. All right, and let's see, some variations, and I'm going to show you some examples here down below. Instead of a topic, give them the structures and the vocabulary that you want them to insert in the story. So if you want to target a little bit more, say, all right, I'm going to give you these structures or these vocabulary, and I want you to put them in the story as they rewrite through the text. But I always tell them the story still has to make sense. It still must flow. We're not just randomly adding in structures and vocabulary into story. I still want it to make sense and flow. You could add 10 sentences throughout different parts of the text, keep it open. Just say, hey, I just want 10 sentences, 5 sentences, but I'm gonna keep it open. I want you just to bring the text to life. I'm not gonna give you a topic or structures. I just wanna see what they can come up with. This can be used with beginners, but remember their ability level. That's what I always say when you guys approach these activities. What is the abilities of your students? What is their level? Because we will need them to be engaged, because otherwise they're gonna shut down if it gets beyond their abilities. Or sometimes I say, hey, say what? Students insert dialogue. What is the character saying or maybe thinking? Say, hey, put a little, what are they thinking? A train of thought in there. Again, you guys add the parameters or make it freestyle. When they're doing say what, if you add them, do a thinking, a train of thought or some dialogue, this is great for first, second person structure practice. Or they can insert a freestanding scene. I know I went through that pretty quickly, but let me give you a few examples here. So sometimes I find the illustration kind of answers the questions a little bit than me just talking about it. So if I said, hey, let's insert characteristic traits about something, and I had my original text, there is a monster. The monster is in Hannibal. The monster is sad. The monster is sad because she has no friends. She doesn't have friends because she thinks she looks scary. Their monster wants friends, but she is shy, and the story continues. If I said, hey, let's put in some just characteristic traits, I could do sentences. Again, I could have gave them maybe some traits I wanted them to work in, but again, I want it to flow. And this could be an example of what you might get. There is a monster. The monster is in Hannibal. The monster is sad. The monster is sad because she has no friends. She doesn't have friends because she thinks she looks scary. She is a monster, but she is not scary. She is beautiful. She has lovely curly hair with pretty brown eyes. The monster wants friends, but she is also shy. But she is also very kind, friendly, and intelligent. She is a wonderful monster. So again, just kind of give you an example of something your students might insert or what you might get back with just the idea of characteristics or traits of a character in the text. Let's do some more examples. I might say here, 3 original sentences on the topic of rooms in a house. If you're doing thematic type stuff or targeted vocabulary, I might say, here's a text, and then can you work in, 3 original sentences on the topics of rooms in a house. Again, you'd have to find the text that would allow you to do this, but again, you can put topics, whatever fits any text. Here I gave the instructions. There are no specific rooms in a house. There's no specific format to the sentences, but they must contain vocabulary entailing rooms in a house, and the story must still flow and make sense. So if we took our sample text, he didn't want to move, but being a kid, he had no choice. Mom and Dad wanted to move, so the family moved. Dan looked at his new place. He thought it wasn't so bad from the outside. He went inside and he looked around. A slow smile came to his face. Yes, this house will do just fine, Dan mused. And then as you went through, these could be example sentences. I won't read the original text, but maybe they inserted first, Dan went to the kitchen. Then he ran into his new bedroom. Next, he darted out to the large terrace. And you can see how it still flows, makes sense, but to try and incorporate it on their vocabulary, personalizing the text and giving them some ownership of it. And I'm going to give you another one because this is so much fun. I have to share this with you because I do this with my students, and I never know what I'm going to get, and it's pretty. They usually do such a great job. Okay, this was a text I was working with in German 3, and for my non-German teachers out there, this basically was a modified version of Little Red Riding Hood. It says Little Red Riding Hood goes home, and she talks on her cell phone. So I said, okay, students. What I want you to do, come up with an original dialogue of what was she saying on the phone? With whom was she speaking? What were they talking about? It's completely open. This was a German 3 class that I did this with, and I'm going to read this to you because I need to kind of annotate as this goes. This is a real response I got from my students about this. So we worked with that text. This, again, was very open with my students, and I asked them to insert a dialogue. Who was she talking to on the way home, and what do they talk about? And so the R stands for Rotkäppchen, which is Little Red Riding Hood, and she's talking on her cell phone with Jake. So the J is for Jake, and I'll do the translating for you. It says, hello, Jake. How are you? Hello, Little Red Riding Hood. I'm doing very bad. I have another kidney stone. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. Kidney stone. This is great because what my students did is they actually worked in what was really happening in their lives. Jake was friends with a student, and they were really good buddies. And so he was talking to Jake in his dialogue here. And Jake had actually just missed a few days of school because he had a kidney stone. Yes, Nierenstein. I gave him the word. It's not high frequency, but this. So he told me it was very important. So we all laughed because he said, "Oh, I have another kidney stone." So he's working in a real event in Jake's life. Little Red Riding Hood says, "Oh, Jake, that's super bad. But I have a problem bigger than your kidney stone." Really? What is your big problem? Little Red Riding Hood. There is a wolf in my grandma's house. Oh no, that's as bad as 2 kidney stones. Can you help me please, Jake? This is the biggest problem of my life. I'm sorry, Little Red Riding Hood, but I can't. I'm too sick right now. Little Red Riding Hood. Jake, you're a baby. Help me, please. Jake says, I cannot. And Little Red Riding Hood says, I hate you, Jake. Do you know somebody, though, who could help me? And Jake says, oh, yeah, my friend Brandon is from North Korea, and he can help you. Now I have to stop and tell you. Jake and Brandon. Brandon was another student in class, and these guys are great. You had to know these guys; they were so much fun. So then he goes ahead and he brings in Brandon into the story, and he says North Korea because this is when North Korea was in the news a lot with the nuclears. This was a few years back with the nuclear weapons. They were in the news a lot. So they brought in some real news topics in here, and he had a little bit of fun with it. And he said, oh, yeah, my friend is from North Korea. He could help you. Uh, and then, so Little Red Riding Hood says, does he have a rifle or a pistol? And again, I want to stop here because part of my district draws from a very rural district where hunting is a part of their life. Where I have many students that they go hunting. It's a very positive experience in their life where they spend times with their fathers, uncles, or their families. So again, with that topic, I always say, you approach that how you are comfortable with and what is the climate and what is your school like. But with mine, I know this was meant very innocently. Drawing from in this class, I had quite a few hunters, and that's why they knew some of the vocabulary. So just, again, you always set the parameters. What are you comfortable with? What do you feel is appropriate? So let's continue. Jake says, no, no, no. He only has atomic bombs. So again, he's bringing North Korea when the atomic bombs were big in the news. And then Little Red Riding Hood says, oh, that's much better. We can kill all the wolves. That's perfect. His telephone number is 555-5555. Hey, thanks a lot, Jake. It's no problem. But now I have to go to the toilet and I have to get rid of this kidney stone. Okay, Jake. See you later. Bye. See ya. And again, if you know these students, man, they had so much fun with this. Really meant lighthearted, but they had a lot of fun with that conversation. But again, I want to bring this illustration to you to see this is really what my students are doing. And they have fun with it. They're bringing in their other students. They're bringing their friends. They brought in, like, at that time, current topics in a playful, fun manner based off after working with the text, but this was very original. Again, I do say this is German 3. They were able to do this. This is not something I would do with my level 1s because they would not be able to produce something this freely on their own. I will go here briefly. You can also take the same idea if we were working with this text in class. Right here towards the end for my non-German speakers, the mother, we worked with this story. The mother makes hot chocolate for them. And then I told him, could you go ahead and right here at this point in the text, could you I want you to insert a freestanding thing, not a dialogue, but just kind of expand the text, make a new little scene, expand upon it. And then this is one I got in translation. The boy and the girl are sitting on the sofa. They are sitting in front of the fire. The fire is warm and cozy. The boy and girl are drinking cocoa. They're not talking. The cocoa is warm and tastes good. It warms them. The mother brings them a blanket. It is warm and soft. The boy is tired and wants to sleep. But the boy says, and that's right where this picks up, Der Junge sagt. So again, I just had them add a little bit, expand a scene, create a freestanding scene, just kind of liven up the text. Not that these aren't great texts, these are great stories. These are from Gerhard Mahosher. Students love his stories. I love working with his stories. He did such a fantastic job, but we can always just, how do we engage our students? How do we try to engage them with the text? Okay, we're getting there, guys. Keep bearing with me here. I hope everybody's doing okay out there. I know it's a lot of information, but we're going to keep going and try to give you guys a little bit more here. All right. I also do, this is more open writing is what you're going to find with, this is what I'm going to do with my open or my upper levels, because when I say open writing, this isn't going to be set where they're just, you know, copying out of a text or just changing one word or here. These are going to be some ideas that I do with my upper levels where they are in a position to more freely create and express themselves without so much support. So keep that in mind when you approach any writing exercise. Where are your students at? What is their level? Because I want them engaged. I don't want them shutting down, getting frustrated. So please don't say vocab lists. Students write an original story based on a list of words or phrases, and they have to incorporate all the words and phrases into an original story. in you guys, I'm going to go ahead. I'll leave this here. There's more writing. I'm going to give you an example here, but you can always come back and see the different variations that you can do. So if I said, okay, I gave this to my level 4 students, and this was originally the target language, and I'm going to show you an example of what I got back. I literally threw this back together really quickly. I wanted to see what my students could do, and this was a level 4. I wanted to throw them off topic. So I gave them the word shopping cart, tie as in clothing, airplane, apple, the phrase the sun is shining, next please, don't forget ketchup and mustard. Maybe the phrases aren't so hard, the vocabulary is not high frequency per se in some cases, but I knew they could handle it. And I wanted to really throw some unrelated things because I was really just more, as a teacher, I didn't know what I was going to get back. And I really wanted to see with these random set of words, what would my students get back with the seemingly odd set of words. And I was blown away. This is a real story that I got back from those words from a student in German 4. These were impressively original writings, and it exceeded any expectations, especially with those words. So this is what I got back. It's 8 o'clock on Sunday. The sun is shining and the birds are singing. He goes to the supermarket. His wife makes him a list. They need apples and ketchup and mustard. He lives in Alaska and he must take an airplane to the supermarket. He is wearing a suit and a tie and goes to the airport. As he leaves, his wife yells, "Don't forget the apples." He flies to the city. In the supermarket, he gets a shopping cart. He gets the groceries and waits in line. The cashier says, "Next, please." He goes to the cashier and buys the groceries with 30 euros. Then he goes home to his wife and they have dinner. When I got that, I was just absolutely blown away. I was like, how original is that? But it flows, it makes sense, and she did a great job incorporating that. So again, you can target lists, you can target vocabularies, but let them, instead of just doing the details, let them put the story around it. Instead of just inserting details, let them put the story around and see what they can do with any kind of like vocabulary list. You guys, there's always kinds of variations. Maybe you guys can do it with a partner or group. One student starts writing and incorporates a word or words from list, then he or she passes it to the next student. They read it and they continue the story incorporating a word or words from the list, and this goes on until all the words and phrases have been used. That can be a lot of fun if you want to give it a fresh little bit of feeling in case just not doing it alone. Or you can also variation. Students write down what they think the text is based on. The text is based on vocabulary list. Like, so example, if I were to pull vocabulary from a text and I give them the vocabulary and I say, okay, why don't you write down what you think the text is based on these vocabulary words, and then you can actually kind of do a comparison. So after they write theirs, they can compare with the original and kind of compare and say, hey, these were the vocabulary words from this text. Again, I keep it kind of short. Write your own. What do you think the story is about? I have them put the story around the vocabulary, and then we kind of compare and see. And sometimes it's amazing how close they can actually get to the original text without ever have seen it. So again, just trying to give you guys some variations, some ideas to go to keep these ideas fresh, so we're not doing the same thing all the time. Okay, just a few more. Fill in the blank, but 1,000 times cooler. It's an oldie but a goodie. Basically here, I literally delete or cut off words or sentences at the beginning, middle, or the end of a story or text. Students are reading the text, and they're going to minus the missing parts, and they have to write what happens in the blank or the missing part. I could give them the parameters. And I do this without working with the text beforehand. We'll just go straight to the text. I'm going to keep the text within their ability that they're able to comprehend it quickly and easily, where we won't have to work with a little bit, where they can focus on the missing parts. And then I have them fill it in. We can do a compare and contrast and share and even vote which version is better. I can tell you your student's version is always going to be better. And just sit tight. I'm going to give you an example here in just a minute. So for example, I wouldn't necessarily do this with a text. I use this as just an example to show you that you can really delete any sentence anywhere in the text, and they could rewrite a sentence that goes, you could just be a word or a phrase in the text. It could be multiple sentences, again, going back to adjectives. It could be finish the sentence, or they could have to like finish the text. So again, just deleting a sentence and having them fill it in is a good way to work with a text, and then doing a little bit of comparing and contrasting with the story still making sense. And I can also do this when I'm simply reading with the text. A quick variation, let's say you don't want to do writing, you've just been working with the text and we've been reading a text. I don't give them the entire text. This is really easy to do, especially with projectors or smart boards. I give them a paragraph at a time, or I project a paragraph at a time. And I do this because that way we're literally all on the same page and no one is getting ahead. So, because if you're working a book, students read at different paces, but if you can, give them a page at a time, or project a page or a paragraph at a time so they're not getting ahead. And sometimes I'll even use the ending as a cliffhanger. Again, I don't give it to them. We've read a text, and I don't give them the ending. And either what I'll do is I will say, hey, it's a cliffhanger. Can't wait to see you guys tomorrow. Come back. We'll pick up here. Kids are a little excited to come back to class to see the end of the text. Or say, hey, guys, I got the ending here. Here's, you got 5 minutes. I want you to get the ending. How do you think it ends? We can do it that way. Or it could be an exit slip. All right, guys, on your way out the door, I'm going to hand you a slip with the ending on it. You take the ending, they'll read a little bit, and then depending on where you want to go with it, it could be, write out a summary or summarize the ending in English, or however you want to work with it. But just some tips that to kind of keep things fresh, but never be afraid to take things, delete parts of text, take things out, have them kind of fill in a little bit there as you guys go on. And I think I got two more for you guys. There are two sides for every story. Perspective writing. This is a lot of fun when you can find a text where you can have your students write about a character's perspective on a scene, situation, or other character. They will give the character's perspective on something that is not in the story or text, and this can also be really good for first-person practice or second-person. So, for example, if we had this little story, again, I just made this up quickly. There's a girl, it's Olga. She has a problem. She has a room. Olga's room does not have a mouse. She wants a room with a mouse. There's a hotel in Springfield. The hotel has a room, but the room doesn't have a mouse. So Olga goes to Boston. There's a girl in Boston. The girl is Marlena. Marlena has an extra room in Boston. Olga says, Marlena, do you have a room with a mouse? I want a room with a mouse. Do you have a room with a mouse? Marlena says no. Marlena tells Olga that she only has a room with a snake. Again, if you can find any part of a text that's going to allow you to expand upon it with perspective, we could ask the question, for example, why in the world does Olga want a room with a mouse? Most of us probably prefer a room without a mouse. Or you could say, from Marlena's perspective, hey, pretend you're Marlena, you open this door, and here's this girl that says, I want a room with a mouse. Do you have a room with a mouse? What are the thoughts going through your head? What is Marlena's perspective on this situation? Or it could be Olga going, what is her perspective as she tells Marlena she wants a room with a mouse and she has a room with a snake? So again, you can take any text anywhere, bound by only by your students' abilities. Again, this might be a little bit more upper level. What is their point of view? From whose perspective? You can ask them to write on what the point of view or perspective of one of the characters in the text is. All right, I'm going to close out with this one for you guys. Sorry, quick drink here. Old school texting. Now, I will tell you, this one I do, and this one can be so much fun. I don't know why, but students buy into this. Just tell them, grab a partner, and I give them a text bubble sheet. Now, this is going to sound a little silly, but I would recommend that you use a text bubble sheet, because if you just say do it on paper, I don't know, it loses a little bit of spark. But as soon as I lay the text bubble sheet in front of them, I don't know, it seems like they buy into it so much more. So that is a hint. So make sure you have a bubble text sheet that they can do this in. But again, I'm going way back to the beginning here, where I do want my students writing it and not just typing it out. Of course, they could text each other with technology. There's all kinds of different ways to do that. But again, I want my students writing the language out on paper. And again, I don't know if it's because I say texting, they really buy into this. I'm going to share that example with you. But they just text each other on paper. They're just writing in the target language and pass the sheet back and forth, responding to each other. And this works well for everyone what they did on the weekend, past tense. If you ask, hey, I want you guys to text back and forth with the question, what did you do on the weekend? Or you can give it to them maybe on a Friday and say, hey, what will you do on the weekend? You know, if you want to work a little bit more future tense. Really, any situation is going to work. Your students buy into it. You could also have students text each other on paper about a text they read. Maybe you guys just worked with a text and they could text back and forth about their thoughts, their feelings about a text they just read, or any of the above exercises, but just say they're texting each other back and forth about it. Again, if you just make things feel a little bit different to students, it feels like a brand new activity to them. And also, if you want to target a little bit more, you can have them incorporate words and phrases into their conversation. It's like, please don't say vocab list, but with a texting twist. Again, just change the format or change the wording a little bit, and I promise you, students will think it's a brand new thing, even though it's very similar to some of the activities. But let me go through this because I want to give you an example of what you're going to get in real life, because you never, like, when your students are sharing personally with you, you're going to learn a lot, you're going to have a lot of fun, you're going to know your students. And this one starts, this is like, good morning, Hayden. How's it going? He writes here, not much. It should be not bad. But and you, Ben? I'm doing okay. I had a boring weekend. What did you do this weekend? Oh, I went to a party. I made a big pizza. I also made a big pizza. And why was your weekend boring? He says, uh, I did a lot of calculus homework, 3 hours a day. Now I'm going to stop you there, because if you knew these two guys, it's hilarious. This guy, yes, he did 3 hours of calculus each day, and he's going to tell you about it if you just know him. And this guy, I loved him, but he definitely went to the party. So they're sharing a little bit of their real life and probably what they really did. Then he asks, why was your weekend boring? Oh, yeah, the calculus. Sorry. Talks about his calculus, and then he responds, well, that's not good. I hate math. And why are your girlfriend's parents mean? And again, let me annotate this a little bit. This is great because they're texting back and forth. I grab these and I'm reading through them. And it's true. This kid here, he hated math. He'd always come in because he had math class before German. He's like, oh, I hate math. And it's so funny. I say that only because he's sharing his real life. These are his real feelings. And then these two knew each other. And this guy over here, his girlfriend, he would always come in and he was like, oh, my girlfriend's parents, they're so mean. He'd always say they're so mean. And it was just kind of a thing in class, this girl that he was dating. It was always just, it got to be a joke. We're like, okay, what did her parents do now? What made her mean? But it's funny to see the kids incorporating this into their real life. So he asked the questions, why are your girlfriend's parents mean? I don't know. They're crazy. My girlfriend is grounded now. Isn't that a great German word, house arrest, for being grounded? Anyway, so he's like, I don't know, their parents are crazy. And he always says, I don't know, they're crazy. And then he says, well, why is Stacy grounded? And he said there was a problem with her computer, and her teacher didn't get her homework, and now she has an F in the class. And he's like, that's ridiculous. I have 3 Fs. And I only laugh because these are real life. This is what he's sharing with me. So I got to talk to Hayden about this. I was like, hey, Hayden, what? You have 3 Fs in school? Because he generally did pretty well in my class. And I was really surprised to see that. I was like, this is for you? I was like, oh, yeah. So I got to learn a little bit of my students, maybe encourage them to try to get some of their grades up and work in some of their classes. But I use this as an example to show you how much your students are going to share with you. You're going to get parts of their real life. They're going to bring in the jokes in class and with your class. It's going to be very personal. And I'll tell you what, there's not a lot of fighting when they're doing, like, fighting with you about an assignment or like, moaning and groaning, because they're sharing their real lives in real moments, and you can have so much fun. I try to share. I always ask my students, can I share this? If they tell me yes, no, I respect the wishes of my students. So, okay. Whew. All right, that was a lot. But I'm going to wrap up here with some final thoughts, and then I'll try to get any questions that you may still have answered. So I'm going to wrap this up with my final thoughts, and I really hope you found value in today's presentation and are taking away something that you can readily use in your class. I know our time is precious, and again, I thank you for taking the time to spend it with me, and I hope you are able to take something back with to your classroom and readily use it. And I always just remember, not everything has to be done at one time. When you feel comfortable, add or try a different element or slowly work through the options. Yeah, I always just say, hey, don't try to do, bam, 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 like 5 in a row, 5 different things in a row in a day. Just take one, put it in, try it at one level, see if it works, adjust it until you get comfortable. I surely don't do these always back to back. It took me a long time to develop these and come up with these, and we just take our time. As we get comfortable, we keep building on it. And again, it's just going to remind you, I know I said at the beginning, always play to your strengths. Just because I did something, it doesn't mean you have to. I always say you're the experts in your class. Your students know you. Just do what you do best, and you're going to enjoy a lot of success. Just be you in the classroom, because your students will see through that pretty quickly if you're not. And always play to your strengths, and just be you, and do the great job in the classroom that I'm sure all of you guys are always doing as we work very hard every day at our jobs. So with that being said, I will wrap it up. If you have comments or you share with them, I will stop sharing my screen here shortly, and I will stay logged on to Facebook there and try to answer any questions for you. Always feel free, you can contact me at my personal email address. You can see that here. Here are my Twitter handles as far as social media goes, if you want to reach me there. Also, if you'd like more on this topic, please check out my book. It's called Grafted Writing. It is available through Teachers Discovery. Everything we talked about here is in the book, plus more. I expand upon the activities. I give more ideas, more extensions. There's different activities. Hey, the text bubble sheet is reproducible in there also. And what you're going to find in the book also is a little bit more. I'm going to give you teacher talk points of like real world, like in the trenches in the classroom experiences and things I've noticed to share with you, and a lot more ideas how to extend the activities and what you can do the activities to help keep them fresh. So if there's something you're totally interested in, check it out. Let me know how you like it. And again, I hope you find everything beneficial, and I wish everyone the best and a continued good end here to the semester. A happy Halloween. And again, thank you for your time. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead. I will stop sharing my screen, but I will stay logged in, and then I will see any questions or any comments you'd like to share. And I wish everyone a great evening, and thank you again.